What is the worst scariest thing that has woken you up? Back when I lived alone in a studio apartment, I used to wake to just about anything. Never woke up more terrified than the night when I woke up to the sound of my toilet flushing. To this day I can only assume that a ghost just couldn't hold it anymore. Woke up to scratching, chittering, and screeching at my second floor window. Sounded otherworldly. Got the courage to look outside. Saw 2 squirrels ducking on a tree branch. First was a phone call at 5 AM to let us know that 2 family members were killed by a drunk driver. Second was a smoke alarm as the entire basement was burning and the fire was almost at the top of the steps. We all barely made it out. The general alarm shrieking through the 1MC speaker right outside of my rack when I was on a submarine. Someone's clothes had caught fire in the dryer, the only one on the boat. I was deep asleep and woke up confused as hell, scared witless and choking on smoke. Woman screaming for her life. Luckily for her it was a big apartment complex and about 30 people got outside before they could shove her in the trunk. Her head was wrapped up in a duct tape mask. It was all quite ducked up. Me and my wife's bed was positioned so if the door to the kids' room was open you could see into their room from our bed. In the middle of the night I wake up for no apparent reason. Before turning over and returning to sleep I glance into our kids' room. I notice our daughter's bed is empty. Strange. I call out to her, no reply. As I call louder, my wife awakens and asks WTF I'm doing. I'm calling for Wilma, I reply. But honey, don't you remember, she died in the car crash, she tells me. As my world crumble and I'm overcome with pain and sorrow, I wake up again. For real this time. Our daughter is safely asleep in her bed. Worst nightmare ever, still gives me the chills. 10 or so years later. My girlfriend's mother telling me there were 2 police officers and my mother at the front door. It was 4 AM. And I was sleeping at the girlfriend's house. They had come to inform me my dad had died. That was around 14 years ago. I'm afraid to say that I don't think this sort of wake up won't happen again. My grandmother was battling lung cancer. Me and my aunt were taking care of her. She was bedridden and close to the end. We knew that. One night I went to sleep and was woken up at 1 AM to the sounds of my aunt screaming my name. I rushed to my grandma's room and saw my grandma hemorrhaging what looked like gallons of blood from her nose and mouth while my aunt held her crying and screaming. I called 911, kept myself as strong as I could until they arrived a few minutes later and then I completely broke down. They pronounced her dead shortly after they got there. I've never felt more pain in my life than to see my best friend bleed out naked on the floor. Edit. I appreciate all the kind words. And the silver, my first. This has definitely screwed me up mentally. It's been almost a year, but I still dream about it every night. Sleep is a total nightmare. She was essentially my second mom, so when she died a piece of me went with her. But I'm trying every day to pick up the pieces and put myself slowly back together. Apartment on fire. Actually this week is the 5th anniversary. When I lived in an apartment complex the fire alarms went off a few times, and even though it was always for some stupid reason such as smoking in the lobbies or whatever, I always grabbed the pets and waited outside for however long it took. So many people just stayed in though, cause they didn't take them seriously. I kinda don't want to be trapped in a burning high rise, so I'll take my chances and waste the time waiting, haha. We used to have this weird old Labrador that lived next door, but would come sleep at us some nights. It was weird because it would stand on its hind legs and trot around for a bit before getting on all fours again. One night I woke to what sounded like someone walking around the room. For about 5 seconds I completely shit myself thinking there was a child walking around my room before I realized it was that dog. I think it did it for food. My house trying to fall apart. I was remodeling a nightmare of a room in a 1925 house. Got into the walls. Anyone who has done this knows what I'm talking about. And it was a nightmare. I removed the layer of plywood behind the drywall to see what the studs looked like. Well, the ducking plywood was holding up the walls. The studs had more or less disintegrated. So, the whole night I heard constant, loud settling noises, not normal ones. Loud pops, wood crunching, etc. Next morning I set up an exterior brace and that kept it sound long enough to properly repair it. Actually just happened last week. Woke up to my dog growling and someone was shining a light into my window at 2 AM. I was super out of it and trying to process what was going on since the light was coming from someone in my fenced in backyard. Then my dog barked loud and the person ran away. Anyone here have one of those robotic vacuums? When the power goes out those duckers start wandering around lost, bumping into sheet. Absolutely terrifying thing to be woken up by at 3 in the morning. In grad school, my roommate standing directly over me, staring down at me, she couldn't decide if she should wake me up or not. She kept hearing this deep voice mumbling at inconsistent intervals and was torn between there's someone in the house and I'm finally actually losing my mind. She was studying psych at the time. We finally figured out that it was the smoke detector wanting new batteries, but good lord, it was terrifying numerical squid. Remember this? This isn't bad or scary, just strange. I was once woken up by a snail. I was sleeping in a room in the basement. One morning, I was woken up by a sound that went squeak, like a squeegee. Tap, 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 squeak, tap, tap, tap. I couldn't figure out what was making the sound, so I looked around the room. When I looked out the window, I saw that a snail was crawling across it and making the sound. The squeak was the snail moving. The tap came from its shell knocking against the glass. My 2-year-old standing over me with a kitchen knife. He wanted sliced apples at 4 o'clock in the morning and somehow managed to climb up on table and pull out a knife. Now we keep them in the cupboard. In January of this year a car ran into my bedroom at 1 am. Those asking for more info. Basically I had just gotten home from visiting my parents and I went to bed around 12:30 am. At 1:04 am a car ran into my bedroom connected half bathroom. My bathroom is about 3 feet squared, so that was completely destroyed, and the car was partially in my room also. My roommate and I went outside after calling 911 to search for the driver. Thankfully he was okay. He was laying on the ground about 20 feet away from a car. He had empty beer cans in his car and pill bottles. He told us he was 25, but we soon found out from police he was 19. This whole situation has been a mess because my landlord wanted to do all the repairs himself. I just moved back into my room last week and had been living in the living room for the past 2 months. I'm glad to finally have a bedroom again, but sleeping in that room still makes me nervous at night. I still can't use my bathroom after 10 PM because it makes me nervous. It'll be fine eventually. I just need to get used to it. One important preface. At the time I lived alone. No roommates. One time I was taking a nap in my bedroom, happened to have a really horrible nightmare, and then woke up to some strange man standing in my bedroom shining a flashlight in my face while I laid in bed. Both of us freaked the duck out. It turned out he was the maintenance guy for the apartment complex I lived in, finally responding to a maintenance request I had put in like 6 months before. He thought the apartment was empty, then heard me thrashing around from the nightmare and went and looked into the dark bedroom, blackout curtains, with his flashlight to see what was making the noise. After both of us recovered from our near heart attacks he was extremely apologetic, and he did finally fix my garbage disposal, but Jesus Christ, that was ducking terrifying for a few seconds. I've woken up several times to the sound of tornado sirens going off in the middle of the day. They test them on the first Wednesday of every month, but when they wake you up your first thought isn't what day it is. I was maybe 5 yo. Woke up to someone banging on the back door followed by gunshots as they entered the house. It was my ex-stepdad. He'd come to try to kill my mother. Thank God he was unsuccessful. Edit, she had been having a bad feeling for a few weeks and that kept getting worse and worse. They were so bad the day of that she asked a real close male friend if he would crash on the couch that night. Psycho X comes in. Gunshots. Male friend shot in the leg. X then proceeds to bite off male friend's ear all while mom is beating the guy with a kitchen chair. I honestly don't know what made him give up and leave. Maybe the hurt back and bleeding head from said chair. 30 years later I realize I never asked that question. Anyway, all this happened while I was hiding under covers in my bed 1 room away. Edit #2 just called mom to ask cause I was really curious. She said he was stumbling around out of it from the chair, hitting him over and over in the head, so when he was close enough to the front door she shoved him out of it and locked it. Then of course called 911. A few years back I hear a thud in the hallway and my 4-year-old daughter screaming in pain. She had fallen and gotten a small but deep cut just above her left eyebrow. When I got out to the hallway, her face, hands, and pajamas were covered in blood, and she was holding her hands against her face. I thought she lost her eye. A quick trip to the ER for a couple of stitches, and she was right as rain, but I gained almost all of my grey hair that night. Oh man, nothing like your kid bleeding copious amounts of blood to get you into superhero mode while giving you all the grey hair. Our only emergency room trip for my son was when he busted the back of his head open on a shelf. Like he had a red third eyeball on the back of his head. Cue the scene at the ER with 5 EMTs standing around helping calm him down, while a doctor came in and just quickly stapled it back together. While studying abroad in undergrad, I was staying the night in a hostel in Barcelona. The room I was in was fairly small, probably about 6 bunks. Was sleeping soundly when I suddenly woke up choking, covered in some unknown powder and hearing a loud whooshing sound. Turns out, an extremely drunk Australian decided to spray a fire extinguisher in the room. It's a toss-up between a few, but I once woke up after a party at my house to a guy leaning over me saying, "Don't worry, I didn't grape you." The sound of something breaking over the baby monitor, and my son crying out. He'd managed to ninja his way out of his bed, had no idea until that day he could get over the railing, out of his room, into the bathroom, and found a vase under the sink. Dropped it, which shattered it, and sliced open his leg pretty good. Required casting and surgical repair. He's good now, over a decade later. Limps sometimes when he gets overly tired, but otherwise no permanent damage. My dog barking only once in a low voice. He will generally go wild if someone is in front of the door or passes through the hallway. Then sitting up in a way he never does and staring at the door. Nothing happened. It was scary as duck, cause it was everything that he usually does not do. Things that are off are scarier than grotesque things that happen emo. One time I woke up to my hamster running in his wheel. Normal, right? Well, the wheel was on the floor and his cage was on a shelf, which means that he had in some way gotten out of his cage and jumped from about a meter up, and he became blind in one eye. Nothing else really happened. I was just pretty scared for the rest of his life that he could escape from his cage at any time. BTW, he opened his eye again after about 6 months. Nothing scary, just pretty weird. I've told this before, but my son has taken to sleepwalking. He used to just stand by the bed, silently, until I'd snap awake and see his silhouette looming over me. Now, he's taken to turning on the lights when he's sleepwalking. I woke up one night, and he was standing there, turning the lights on. And off. On. And off. Completely zoned out. I get him back to bed, and I think, duck this, I'm sleeping downstairs for the rest of the night. Around 3 o'clock I wake up. All of the lights downstairs are on. Edit. I go to a doctor's appointment after posting this, and come back to see everyone's sleepwalking experiences. Cool stuff. Some general answers to repeated questions. It only happens every now and again, and it seems to come in what we've called storms. He'll sleepwalk for 2 or 3 nights, and then have a week or so off. We do keep the front doors locked. We don't shut our bedroom doors, though, because he has walked face first into them while sleepwalking, which, if you think a kid standing over you is creepy, wait until they slam the door open with their head. I've become used to it. My reaction went from OMG WTF after the first few times to, damn it, again. My wife, though, is creeped out. Neither my wife or I, or his younger sibling, have been sleepwalkers anyway. Keep on walking in the sleep world. One time my son woke me in the middle of the night, crawling into my bed, and telling me a man was bothering him. I usually try to go banish the monsters in his room, so he can go back to sleep in there. So I went, and admonished the air, leave my son alone. This isn't your place. This time my son wanted to stay in my room, and not go back to his own bed, so I made room for him, and moved over to the edge of my bed, and fell back asleep. About 30 minutes later, I had a frightening lucid dream that this tall, shrouded man was at the side of my bed and started jabbing at my side, telling me that I interrupted his fun and now he was going to bother me. I couldn't move and I just had to put up with it until I was able to get my dream life willpower to focus and let me move out. My math teacher calling out my name 6+ times in a room of 20 other students and me slowly waking up while mumbling shhhh be quiet, not realizing that the voice I was hearing wasn't, in fact, in a dream. Edit, eternal gratitude for the silver. A 6.0 earthquake at 3 o'clock in the morning. Probably the most helpless I have ever felt. I expected my ceiling fan to fall on me. When you're lying in bed with no protection nearby, you basically just have to hold on and hope everything is alright.